In the stretch, my name is Sean Barnes. I have actually been a part of the CIO and CHRO community for a number of years. While not as active recently, once I received a phone call from Jess asking to come talk on this topic, I was all in. You see, I've started to experience and sense this mounting frustration and these challenges that have begun to emerge between the CIOs and the CISOs over the years. This just friction and almost like this idea of these competing priorities that have been existing. And I think it's important for us to understand that these are not competing priorities, they are simply priorities. And it is our responsibility as technology leaders to harmonize and create alignment across all of these priorities. That is what we're going to be talking about today. Before we really get into it, I have to do a little bit of housekeeping. Many of you are aware that there are no recorded Evanta sessions until now. They have graciously allowed us to record this session, these discussions, because we want to be able to share this knowledge with as many technology leaders as possible. So, whenever we're talking about the Evanta team, I have been to more Evanta and other events over the years than I can possibly count. And this team is full of rock stars. It's not like they have one or two rock stars in the Evanta community. Every single one of them. I don't know where they grow them or hire them or find them, but I'm going to ask all of you, can you please stand up for just a moment for me? Come on, stand up. Let's give the Evanta team a round of applause for what they have done. Paula, Kara, would you please come join me? Thank you. It seems that we have shared stages before, both of us. It is always a pleasure when our paths cross. Okay, so Paula and Kara, both CIOs. Actually, I'm going to give each of you a moment to introduce yourself. Can you please start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Paula Stewart. I'm the CIO of Crescent Energy. We are an up and midstream oil and gas company here in Houston.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kara Pelecky, and I'm the CIO at American Bureau of Shipping. That's an engineering company in the maritime business, and I've been there for 2 years. But most of my experience is actually in nuclear power, so many of my stories will be from that environment.
So this topic is something that I've started to pick up on quite a bit. Is this something that both of you have seen start to emerge in recent years?
Go ahead.
Definitely. I think that CIOs and CISOs have always kind of played the same priority game and the importance of priority. So I think I've always seen that there's these gaps, or these gaps between conversations and discussions with these leaders. But I really feel like there doesn't need to be the gaps. We all have the same purpose. And
I think technology, as it has become more of everything, is moving the CISO closer in the CIO. Their roles are overlapping. Mm-hmm. If I think back to my first CIO role, I've been a CIO in nuclear power in the Middle East, at a global security company, a global electronic security company, and then now a global engineering company. Initially, that role in cybersecurity in nuclear power was very separate from the CIO, right? They kind of managed our borders, right? And we did our thing, right? We didn't really need to cross over. But now, as it's become more and more a part of everything, our roles are very are converging, which is a word you probably heard a lot today, and we heard a lot yesterday. And so it's changing that relationship. It sometimes is changing the right reporting relationship. It's changing the way that we work together.
So you touch on something that I think is very important, and that is the reporting structure, the reporting relationship. We had conversations on this topic just yesterday, actually, which is a beautiful segue into our first question. In your perfect world, would security report up through you as the CIO or somewhere else?
We pre-talked about this one. We don't necessarily agree, which I think is great. We'll have some differences. I think that it varies on the scenario. And I think it should report at the place where you get the most traction. I think traction is the key. So I have had it report completely in a different business unit. I've had it report to me, but it was top secret, and so I couldn't know what they were doing. That was really strange. I've had it where I was the business unit CIO, and I received it as a service from the enterprise. I received security as a service, and that worked too. And now, right now, it reports to me, and that is because I am using it as a lever to make things happen that are mutually beneficial, CIO and CISO. So that is the way I'm getting traction, is because of that reporting relationship.
Now, you have a little bit of a different situation.
I do, and I think there's not a right answer, to be honest, in every situation. I think it really depends on what the company, how the company wants to run, how big the company is. So company size is a very huge indicator of how you want these two roles to run in the company. I like them running in parallel, reporting to the same person. I think where we're going with security in our world, it's just as complex as being a CIO is. It's not, you're just dealing with one small thing like protecting the borders of your organization. It is deep fake, there's emails, there's just so much more that I think that at a peer level with a CIO, the CIO and the CISO can work a little bit more in more of a better kind of a marriage in the relationship. So depending on your company size, and depending on how much budget you have, I do like them separate in some instances and being more peer level. You don't have as much as that ego sometimes either in some of that peer level performance in those goals. And so that's kind of where I like to have it stand. But again, I think you really have to look at your organization and what's the best fit.
There's some people that might argue that there's a little bit of a conflict of interest whenever the reporting structure falls kind of like what you've described. What are your thoughts on that? What has your experience been?
Conflict of interest is a good topic. It's a good example, right? I mentioned there have been times where the CISO or the security function reported to me, and I was blind. I was purposefully blind to those activities, right? It was done for national security reasons in another country, right? And it was a unique scenario, but it was meant to keep those types of ethical issues from taking place. Today, where I do have the CISO reporting to me, I think that is solved by the fact that my CISO is the only member of my team that regularly accesses the board. Right, so there is a highway there, a path for that to happen, and it's used to keep risk at the forefront, to make sure that it's almost like a check and balance, right? But like I said before, I've actually been using it to get stuff done, right? Because security investments are sometimes a magic word, right? You can play the security card and then it gets done, right? But I don't want to abuse that, right? I want to use it in just the right way to get those mutually beneficial things done.
As we start leveraging technology more and more to kind of drive transformation in businesses, we're seeing more of a C-level presence in the technology realm. CIO, CISO, CTO. At what point do we get to where we start thinking, are there too many technology cooks in the kitchen?
I don't think there's too many technology cooks in the kitchen. I think what's happening is that we are having to grow with technology, not to be behind. And some of these skill sets CIOs don't have and CISOs don't have. A CIO is not the person that always does all the technology or the data, like chief data officer. We're not necessarily the ones that should be doing the data, right? You have a different kind of skill set for that. So I think what's happening is that we are seeing that technologists are vast, right? And there's, we don't just going to have a CIO that does it all. It's just not possible anymore with the way that technology is going. We need other skill sets to do that. So it's just where do they sit in the organization? Where does the CISO sit, the CIO sits, the CTO, the CDO sit? Where do they sit? And sometimes, surprisingly enough, they don't sit in IT. They sit in the business. So I don't think we necessarily have too many. We just need to define, I think, as we go more into technology, where they sit and what the actual skill set is.
I agree with you. I think that we have to define, right? As we have said before, technology is now everywhere, right? Technologist roles are everywhere. And day to day, my company allows the citizen developer, even encourages the citizen developer and supports them and makes things happen, right? But when a problem comes, and it happens in that citizen development world, the skills have become too challenging and they're not able to remediate, they're not able to manage it. Right? It's beyond their skill set, and we need to build those skill sets up, because I'm not going to be able to pull all that capability back into my organization. It's out there for good. But I need to support them and get them ready to be that security front line and be the technical front line that they are trying to be.
So as technology starts to kind of permeate through all aspects of our lives and business, you just mentioned CDOs as well. So there's all these C-level executives, and I think it's important that we have a depth of knowledge in each of these domains. Do both of you think, or do one of you think, that we're going to start to continue to see more siloed off segments within technology, and how do we navigate through that?
I think it'll be the opposite.
Okay.
I don't think they'll be siloed. Right? I mentioned that at a time I had security as a service for me, right? One of the things that did was it almost like paused my learning in the security space. Because that for a period of time, I received this from someone else. I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't have to understand. It was a part of what they did to me or gave to me. But now, when it is a part of my world, I have to learn and understand much more than I did before. And all of those distributed technologists, we have to all do the same thing.
I think a little differently. I think that there is going to start to be more siloed, because I don't think everything belongs in IT. I think that some of these belong in the business. Mm-hmm. I think that they're the owners of the data, they're the owners of the tools, they're the owners of the understanding of the workflows, but they need to have a dotted line to IT where we help to facilitate the functioning of the tools. But I think that they might belong depending on what kind of business you have outside of IT.
Do you believe there might be any risk of breakdown of communication?
Oh, of course. And I think that's just something that is going to have to naturally be managed.
Yeah.
I think we have that now, regardless,
Yep.
within the same
Today.
the same department. I think we need to start thinking more outside the box and not thinking about what we've done in the past, right? We've got new generations coming up that work very differently than some of the other generations, and they communicate very differently. And we need to start accommodating that type of kind of communication and working together. So communication is going to be very big, but you don't put something somewhere just because it works, you feel like it's going to work best there. I think that some of these roles will work even more efficiently and better in other areas than IT.
One of the things that does come to mind is I do believe that it is important to have silos, because you have that depth of knowledge and understanding in each of these domains. Where I think the opportunities really lie is being able to focus on creating porous walls between all of the silos so that you can allow for communication and collaboration at all levels, instead of having a manager get frustrated, go up to the CIO, then go to the CISO, and then come back down to an analyst. We need to be able to coach and guide all members of the team and help them understand how to navigate through that conflict together at their level, and understand that it is important for us to solve problems at the lowest level first before escalating things up to the top.
And it's our teams are professional sports teams. We're not families. We're a professional sport team. So you bring your players in where they need to play, but you need to understand every point of the game, right? And what all players play and how they play. And there's that. You may not be on this side of the team, but you're on this side of the team, but you all are on the same team. So it's treating your organization as a professional sports team.
Another comment about, I definitely agree with the porous walls idea, but I think like a smaller organization just can't afford to have silos.
Correct.
Right? They don't have enough people to have silos. They have to have people that are multi-skilled. And I think that is probably one of the biggest frustrations I see in my CISO and working with the rest of the team, is that they literally can't sleep at night about the things that they're worried about. Right? And then they come and they say, I've got this solution I need to go do to fix this. And those others don't have enough background or understanding to go make it happen, right? Back to that traction thing. You need a careful balance between those demands of these terrible things that are going to happen and we've got to protect ourselves from, versus actually making something happen. Like just buying a tool, implementing a tool isn't enough. It needs to actually get where it needs to go, have the governance of where it needs to be, and be used like it's appropriately, or else we've just bought a lot of tools. And those two things, in a siloed world, we don't make it happen.
Yeah, I would agree. Company size is very huge. How much you have in your budget? What is your IT budget? What is the budget you can spend?
So as we think through these challenges, what areas do you think create the most tension between the CIOs and CISOs?
What they think is important. I think that we, at the end of the day, wants what's best for the company. But sometimes when a CISO comes and says, we need to mitigate this situation, they may not understand what the impact will be. Shut down production, you can't do that, it's gonna cause issues in the infrastructure. So I think that and then, maybe the infrastructure side doesn't understand if we don't do this, we could have a major breach and everything could be gone. So I think the biggest thing is CIOs and CISOs believe their side is the most important side. But what we're not understanding is they're both the most important. Both sides are extremely important. And it's just having communications coming and saying, hey, here we are. You're gonna have resistant CIOs and you're gonna have resistant CISOs. But at the end of the day, I think we just want to we all want to protect the company.
I sense the tension happening in kind of the tech debt area. I mentioned that the security, the elements of security used to be just protecting the border, but now you've got to protect the mushy middle, right? And that mushy middle is just filled with tech debt, or it's filled with choices that were made in controls, or lack of controls, or poor architectural standards, or development standards. Like that mushy middle is just filled with discovery, right? So that the poor CISO is trying to structure that mushy middle and not getting the support that it takes to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a number of conversations with CISOs over the years where they just express this frustration. My CIO just doesn't get it. They just don't get it. I'm trying to protect the corporation. How do you respond to that?
Oh, we get it. We do. We get it. We promise we get it. We just might not understand all of it. And so what I would suggest is building a relationship with your CIO and trying to help us to understand what is it that is the risk. What is the risk? It's one thing to just say, hey, we have a risk, this could happen, but really helping us understand what the risk is, what your thoughts are in mitigating the risk, so that we can come back to you and say, okay, love that, but this would cause this problem here in the infrastructure that you may not be aware of because it's not what you see every day. You just don't have the visibility to it. But we do understand, and we do know y'all that CISOs understand too. I think there's just needs to be better communication. We, again, want to help you make the company safe, and we want to help you put in the tools that make the company safe, but it comes down to, just kind of putting your ego aside and saying, this is something that I'm seeing.
And I've seen two ways for improving that part of the problem. One is never wasting a good crisis. Once a week, I get a call from the CISO saying this wild and crazy thing happened, and it's highlighting this gap in the mushy middle, right? And we use that to defend the risk and the business case for doing X, Y, or Z, right? Publicizing them and saying, we've got this handled, but it could have been handled better if we had done blah, 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 blah. That's been a great way for us to defend some of the investments that are keeping the CISO up at night. And then the other, and this was most successful at a really big company, was actually having a security and infrastructure projects PMO. So it was a separate PMO specifically for projects that were implemented for security or infrastructure tools, and there was the same kind of portfolio prioritization, the same type of management of an implementation, the same type of change management, all those types of things happened, but on a focused basis, so that there was a lot of follow-up for the right things to be done, and then planning for the next year, and the next year, and the next year, so it was not myopic.
I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. For such an important role, it's interesting that there isn't really a standard required for training or certifications for a CISO. Not having an agreed upon measuring stick for this creates challenges in determining whether someone is actually qualified for a CISO role. Kara, whenever you hear that, what comes to mind?
I just empathize. That's a question. There's not really a standard for our role. There's not really a standard for even like board membership for but there is for financials, but maybe not for cyber. I'm thinking back to my first day on the job in this role. I got a message. It was copied to my CISO. How is our security posture? Like from the CEO. The CEO was asking for like a temperature check. How is our security posture? And I was like, what kind of question? That's a hard question. And why is he asking me that today? Is there something, I had no realm or background on what this was. And I think it was highlighting that there is no standard, right? So they don't know how they can trust, right? And day to day, you have to really build up that trust in your capabilities because there is no standard. It's time spent, it's relationship, it's exposure to make that comfort level be there.
I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of tools and some certifications for security that are starting to come out now. They're a little bit more specialized in certain areas. There's a lot more SEC regulations too around security, right? So there's a lot of things you've got to be aware of. So if you're a publicly traded company like we are, we have to understand what those are. We have to understand how, if something happens, what reports we need to put it in, getting general counsel involved. I think those are really important things for CISOs to understand and know. It's not just to say, oh, I'm going to use this tool because it's really great here. Really understand the legal ramifications for companies on if something happens and what steps you have to take, and understanding the new SEC requirements that came out and how companies have to abide by them as publicly traded companies. So there's a lot more stuff that is coming out. You just got to really kind of look for it and kind of figure out what works best for you and where you are at your company.
We had a question come in. How do you feel about non-technical leaders moving into the CIO and especially CISO roles, kind of piggybacking off of what we were just talking about?
Well, I would call myself a relatively non-technical CIO. I frame myself as a transformational CIO, as a people CIO, and like I said, I had a pause when I was working at that company where I was a business unit CIO, and I felt like I wasn't learning as much, and it's like I became less technical, and I had to regroup and get back to, gain that skill again for this role I had here. I'm perfectly fine with it, depending on the type of role that is at hand.
I am a technical CIO, and so I've struggled with some of the other things that non-technical CIOs are really, really good at. So we all lean more on what we're used to. I mean, I worked my way into technology and being where I am now through doing. So I can, build an architect network, right? You're probably better at some of those non-technical CIO stuff that I maybe struggle with a bit. But I think that there needs to be an understanding of technology, especially with how fast we're going. And I think CIOs are going to have to start shifting a little bit more into understanding that technology and how it works, because it's getting a little bit more advanced, and you can't just talk your way into something or talk your way out of something. There's too much proof on how this all works. So I would suggest getting somewhat of that core knowledge from your team so that you can have that best conversation when picking that technology and working with CISOs who are generally very technical.
And this kind of goes back to the prior question, but we're no longer in the world where something might happen. Mm-hmm. Something is going to happen, right? So we've had to, over the last few years, change the mindset of the other executives to not fear that moment, right? To be prepared for that moment, to be prepared for how it happens. And that goes not just in how the organization behaves, but in your mindset of what is success for a CISO, what is success for a CIO. Is it not having any events? Right? That's not a realistic goal. It is, did I handle the events? And I think that changes things a lot for the relationship between all parties. And then as technology has become more and more a part of everything, the layers, the complexity is just so much, right? And nobody, including a non-technical CIO, nobody wants to feel dumb. Right? We don't want to feel dumb when you're in those moments, right? And so a great way to success is to help that person that you're presenting, that you're looking for approval from, to not feel dumb. Right? And things will go a lot smoother.
I'm going to go down a little bit of a tangent here, but I think I'm going to pull it all back for all of you. I have a unique career trajectory, and then I spent about 2 decades in IT in the infrastructure and security side of things, and then 8 years ago started leading human resources. I know, break some brains, mine for sure. But I gradually got to a point where I was much better at leading people. And then eventually, I was given safety and transportation and ESG and started PMO. I think there is a tremendous amount of value in getting exposure to other functional domains because you get insights into other areas that you otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to do. So if any of you see an opportunity to branch out, and I'm not saying you got to go do anything with HR because, my God, it will wreck you. But if you get a chance to branch out and do something different and help other leaders in other areas of the business, it is going to make you better, it is going to make your team better, and the business overall better. So don't get hung up on certifications, get hung up on adding value. That is the most important thing that you need to focus on. Back to our questions. All right, the path from CISO to CIO is a goal for many in security. Do you feel that the experience as a CISO makes someone equipped to take on the CIO role? And what challenges do you think someone might face in going from CISO to CIO?
I think you can do anything you want, to be honest with you. I would never say, no, you can't. I think that a CISO can be a CIO. I think a CIO can be a COO. I think it just really depends on how you have built your career and what knowledge you have. What I would caution with is being a CIO, it's very infrastructure heavy. It's very comms heavy, server heavy. It's not just about security and applications and just protecting the outer barriers. There's a lot to go into being a CIO and understanding the company structure for infrastructure. But just like there is with being a CISO, I can't stand up here or sit up here and say I know everything about being a CISO. I do not, by any stretch. I'm not a CISO. So yeah, I think anybody can do anything they want to do if they really want to do it. And I just think they have to learn the skills. I would never say no for that.
Kara, what do you think are the biggest skills or the most important skills for a CISO to start focusing on building and developing if they have aspirations to step into that CIO role?
I think it is about that the CISO has a lot of experience in managing risk and conveying risk and in measured ways, and not like the house is burning or the sky is falling, but in conveying that risk, almost like a risk business case. And I think that skill is what's going to put them on that right trajectory towards CIO. I do think, kind of answering the question before that you just answered, that I think the CISO was the most logical path to CIO, but I think it's becoming less, not less logical, but the other roles like infrastructure leader or application leader are gaining in their almost like an equal space towards being the CIO, because technology and security is in everything now. So those things that a CISO has been doing on behalf of us is now a part of everything, and so they're gaining those skills as well. So it's becoming a little bit more broad.
You touched on something that's actually really important, and that's the effective communication piece. I might make the argument that CIOs have to communicate with a lot more people at different levels in the organization than CISOs. CISOs obviously have to speak with the audit committee, the board, senior executives, and things like that. But they don't always have to deal with the operators in the field, the district managers, and understanding their challenges that they might encounter. So I would say that also adding in effective communication, leadership skills, because CIOs usually have more people on their team and larger teams to have to navigate. So what are your thoughts on that?
I would agree. I think that, partnering with the CIO and kind of, wanting to learn more about what the CIO does, for our organization, they do go a little bit deeper and do speak to others in the organization, not just through the CIO for security. But I think communication, again, is a big thing. You can learn a lot from those that you speak to lower in the organization about how they're using the tools, why they're using the tools, and that only better prepares you to get into a CIO position.
We've spent the last year improving our phishing response capabilities. We've called it creating a cyber army from within, like our own folks. When I came, people were not treating the phishing tests with any validity. They were just ignoring them. Like, some people were failing them, but ignoring them, and most people were just ignoring them. And that was really causing some concern all the way up to the CEO and the board. They were really worried about this. And then we brought some more structure to it, did some better communication, which was key. Communication. And we created a panic. right? It was not, it was, everybody's afraid to click on anything, they're worried they're gonna get in trouble, like we completely went to the other side. And so I basically sent my CISO and the entire security team out into the field, right? Because the tests that we were doing are very reasonable. They are what we experience and people see every day. We are not tricking people, right? We're giving them all the good clues, right? And we sat with them, we talked to them, and we started to change their perspective. And just in 6 months, we're starting to see that they are experiencing real phishing attacks and calling us, right? And and initially, the folks that were experiencing them just felt sick, like afraid and scared, right? But they're now switching and feeling more like a sleuth, like a partner with us, right? And it's really changed the way they're feeling, because those bad guys are scary to them. And this it had made us as a security team not be the scary ones, but be a partner, and we need you. It's not just the CISO, we need you too. And there's been some good examples of that.
Personal liability is a big concern for CISOs. Wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that is growing concern, right? And just the other day I saw an article that came out, I think it was on CIO website, and it was about this, and I hadn't thought about it before. I mean, I thought about it when the SolarWinds ruling came out, but then I didn't really think about it, and I thought about it with that article, and it said, is your CISO protected? So I went to our general counsel and I asked, and verified that they are. They are part of the different legal policies that we have for the officers in the company, and specifically the CISO is included in that. So I had the general counsel reach out and convey that to the CISO to ease his mind, help him understand what kind of protections were in place for that, because it's a concern. Right? And the CISO isn't always at a C level, right? Sometimes they have the C, but they're not really they're literally like a director and they're here, so they might not think they're included. So that eased their concern a bit.
So for the CISOs that are basically acting CISO, but they don't have the C title, how do they navigate that?
I think they need to talk to their general counsel, or they need to talk to someone and see what their protection is. I think it's different for every company. I don't think there's a standard across the board, but I think there is a concern, which there is. If you're responsible and the head of security, they're going to come to you. And so it is your responsibility and your role to ask the questions. These are maybe hard questions to ask, or you're not sure how to ask them, but they're questions to ask because you have a life to protect as well. And so I would ask the questions of your company. How are you protected if something happens?
So that kind of feeds into the leading up conversation, having a conversation with the big boss. Hey, I'm responsible for all of this. If something goes down, it's my name that's going to be named, but I don't have the title. I have all the responsibility, but I don't have the title. I don't have the comp. Like, how do you have that conversation? It's easy to say, go have the conversation, but like, how do you have the conversation?
Well, I fix it. Each time it's happened, first thing I do, I fix it. I think sometimes the C word is a problem for any role, right? Some companies are just sensitive about having a chief. And so you make it maybe not about the title, right, and you make it so that the risk is covered, that individual is covered, they're compensated appropriately, and that kind of thing. You can try that.
Yeah, I don't think it's about the title at all. I think it's about protecting your role and your responsibilities and making sure that they're defined. And I think it's going to your leadership and saying, I want to make sure I define what my roles are, my responsibilities in the company are, and then I would like you to come and help me to understand how I'm protected with these roles and responsibilities in this company. But it really, being a C or not a C doesn't, in a lot of organizations, matter. You're still the heading of the security department. And I've been asking about your team as well. So if you have people underneath you, what is their protection as well? Because it might be across the board in your team.
And I think you can always use the board as the lever as well. It's important that you have built up the organization to understand that something is going to happen, that too much good news is probably a lie. And if you've gotten them prepared for that, it only builds up you as whether you're a director or a chief or whatever, it builds up that you show how you're handling things and not how just everything is smooth and pretty and there's nothing wrong. Mm-hmm.
So we have quite a bit of interest in those from CISO wanting to ascend into the CIO role. How important is it for CIOs to have a good understanding of the business's priorities?
Key. key in an organization, and it's CIOs, it's kind of new. CIO role has evolved a lot in the last 10 years. We weren't necessarily strategic business partners. We weren't running IT as a business. And there's still some lag in that in ways for the business units to want to talk to us and trying to understand, well, don't we just fix printers? No, we kind of do a lot more than that, just, so you know. So it's really connecting with certain business units and the people of those business units and having a team on your team. It's not the CIO's responsibility to do it all. You have a team. And they go out to these business units. How are you doing this? What are your processes? How does this affect security? And building those relationships as a CIO role is evolving into that strategic business partner.
When I go back to never waste a good crisis, there's problems every day that are happening, and you can show how that problem is stopping that business priority.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Understanding the process.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that's so interesting when a crisis occurs, those in the CISO role have such an incredible opportunity to go out, interact with the local business unit or district that the issue occurred at, build relationships with them, and start understanding how their business operates. So above and beyond just never letting a good crisis go to waste, you also learn more about the business, the operations that you can take back and make more informed decisions and lean into being more of a thought leader in your organization as opposed to just focused on the security piece of it.
Yeah, and I think that IT people in general are just a little bit more introverted. I am as well. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to reach out to these people and say, hey, I read this, or I've seen this tool, or how do you use this? It's the best way to learn is from your users. Don't feel like you can't go and ask questions about what they're doing in the business, or if you're concerned about a tool they're using security-wise, ask questions about it. Again, I know IT generally, in IT we're a little bit more introverted, but it's good to ask those questions so you can build your knowledge.
So what are some of the best ways that you have seen CIOs and CISOs interact and work together to be able to drive transformational change, leveraging technology while protecting the corporation?
So from that first day when I got the message from the CEO saying, what's our security posture, I realized that security had magic words in this company. It was a special category of strength and power. And so the most successful has been us working together to look for mutually beneficial things, to make the right things happen because of that, but not abusing it, right? Initially, at every company I've been at, there has been a sense that security will take care of it. This is security. Let's say their name is Joe. Joe's got this, right? More and more so, we need 1,000 Joes, and it's a part of all of us, right? And it's not just Joe, and we've got to get it into everybody. And that has been the key to getting that recognition that Joe's not going to handle it. He cannot do it by himself, right? And it has made things more successful.
Yeah, I think that the best way to do it is to understand what the priorities of each area are. What are the security priorities? Sitting down with your CIO or your head of IT or whoever leads the IT department in the team and saying, what are your priorities? What are the business priorities? What does your CEO want for the company? Sitting down and mapping your priorities out and saying, what is security's role in this? And what's infrastructure, IT's roles in this? And what can we do and work together at the best benefit of the company? Okay, we have this one as a quick win. This one's gonna take us 18 months to do. And start prioritizing and having ownership on how that work is going to be done. IT's never over, right? It's a journey. You're never done. You're never going to be done with security. You're never going to have your systems and your infrastructures and your company 100% done, right, with security. So it's really just having that good relationship and understanding the priority of the projects that overlap and then getting them done as you go. And then, again, things will shift as things happen in your company, but you'll be able to then have more of a vision and a roadmap of how IT and security can both benefit in the business.
Some things that come to mind for me, priorities, yes, accountability is a big one. It's easy to cast blame and frustration across the fence. And I think it's more challenging to take accountability for yourself, your actions, your team, all the things that you are doing. And I think one of the things that is probably the most important are for you to build and establish trust with your CIOs. The best way to do this, in my experience, is to have conversations above and beyond just what is going on in the business. Yes, you need to understand the technology. The CIOs need to understand the technology to protect the corporation. Build a relationship. Ask them about their kids, their dogs, their travel plans. Start to connect with them on a deeper level, on a human level. When you connect with them on a human level, you start to build depth to the relationship itself. And when they trust you, it's going to make it so much easier for you to float things across their desk and then to say, cool, got it, yes, let's make it happen. Or be able to feel comfortable pushing back and saying, we can't do that now because of this. Focus on building relationships, focus on building trust and effective communication. Those are going to be key.
Yeah. And I echo that that trust is going to be really helpful, because as a CISO, you're probably often accused of just constantly bringing bad news. Constantly bringing bad news. I am the biggest optimist. I'm always a smiler at work. Everybody's like, oh, she's always so happy. And yet, every time I come with the CISO, they're like, oh, here's Kara, gloom and doom and bringing bad news. Like, no. So you're going to need that for resilience and that trust, because it is never done. It's never, and you're going to have to be ready for bad news.
Yeah, and I think that once you build those relationships, you're going to see that the CIO is not so bad, right? We're not so bad. You just got to get to know the CIO and build that relationship.
So one quick thing I want to say is it's Stacy Cagney's birthday tomorrow.
What?
Happy birthday, Stacy.
He's right there.
That's not embarrassing at all. I would like to thank both of you for volunteering as tribute to come to this den of wolves and have this conversation. If any of you have any questions for any of us, come catch us really quickly afterwards. Otherwise, go build relationships with all of your CIOs, start building trust, and start driving change.
Thank you.